Hello, my name is John Erskine. Thanks for joining me for another grammar tutorial. In today's video, I'm going to talk about English pronouns. This is a very large topic, so this video is going to be rather long. However, by the time you're finished watching this video, you'll have all the information you need to correctly use the various pronouns in the English language. The pronouns I'll be covering in today's video are personal, indefinite, demonstrative, possessive, relative, interrogative, reciprocal, reflexive, and intensive. These are big words, and I understand if you feel a bit overwhelmed by them, but don't worry. By the end of this video, you'll understand each of these types of pronouns and how to properly use them. Before I get started, let me remind you that if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section below, and I promise I'll answer all of your questions there. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Let's start by reviewing what a pronoun is. A pronoun is a word that may replace and substitute for a noun or noun phrase in a sentence. The noun being replaced is known as the pronoun's antecedent. Pronouns can do everything that a noun can do. Pronouns can be a subject, direct object, indirect object, and the object of a preposition in a sentence. Without pronouns, we'd have to keep repeating nouns in a sentence. That would make our speech and our writing repetitive and awkward. Let's look at an example. Larry and Mary are in math class together. Larry likes studying with Mary because Mary is funny and cute. Mary is also a good friend and helps Larry when Larry doesn't understand the material. As you can see, the sentences are repetitive and a bit awkward because I use the people's name each time I refer to them in the sentence. So how can we improve the sentences? We can improve the sentences by using the pronouns he, she, him, and her. So when we change the names and replace them with pronouns, we get Larry and Mary are in math class together. He likes studying with her because she is funny and cute. She is also a good friend and helps him when he doesn't understand the material. That sounds much better, doesn't it? So anytime you want to talk about a person, animal, place, or thing, you can use pronouns to make your speech or writing flow better. I hope by the end of this video you'll see that pronouns are actually easy to work with. However, there are a few important rules you need to remember. Firstly, subject pronouns may be used to begin sentences. For example, he ran very fast. He is the subject of the sentence. Secondly, subject pronouns may be used to rename the subject. For example, it was she who decided we should go to the zoo. So instead of using the person's name, we use she to talk about who made the decision to go to the zoo. Thirdly, indefinite pronouns do not have antecedents. They are capable of standing on their own. For example, no one likes taking tests. Object pronouns can be used as direct objects, indirect objects, and objects of the preposition. These include you, me, him, her, us, them, and it. For example, Mr. Evans talked to her about the assignment. So her is an object of the preposition. Mr. Evans talked about the assignment to whom? To her. And lastly, possessive pronouns show ownership, but they do not need an apostrophe. For example, the cat played with its toy, not the cat played with its toy. In the second sentence, its, it apostrophe s, is it is. So we cannot say the cat played with it is toy. Now that we've been through what a pronoun is and some of the rules that govern the use of pronouns, let's start talking about the types of pronouns in the English language. The first type of pronoun we're going to talk about today are personal pronouns. Personal pronouns take on the following forms. First person, as in I, second person, as in you, and third person, as in he, she, and it. They can be singular or plural, and they can refer to male or female. He is male, and of course she is female. Personal pronouns can refer to objects, animals, or people. The pronoun it is usually used for things. The pronoun it, he, and she can all be used for animals. Personal pronouns also provide us with the following information. They tell us who is speaking. They tell us whether the antecedent is plural or singular. And they answer the question, is the antecedent male or female, a mixture of males and females, or unknown? The pronouns I, he, she, it, you, we, and they are all subject pronouns. This means they are used in the subject position of a sentence. The pronouns me, you, him, her, it, us, and them are all object pronouns. And as the name implies, they're all used in the object position in a sentence. Object pronouns can be direct objects, indirect objects, or objects of the preposition. Object pronouns are affected by the action of the subject of the sentence. Sometimes it can be difficult to tell the difference between subject pronouns and object pronouns. So, it could be helpful if you can remember that subject pronouns are the pronouns doing the action of the verb. Object pronouns are the pronouns affected by the doing of the action of the verb. For example, if I said to you, I want you to eat this cake, I is the subject pronoun and it's doing the verb want. You, object pronoun is affected by what the subject pronoun wants. The subject pronoun wants you to eat this cake. So if you do what the subject pronoun wants, you'll eat this cake. Also remember that subject pronouns come before the verb. Object pronouns come after the verb. Here's a table of both the subject and object pronouns. As you can see, some subject pronouns are identical to certain object pronouns. Okay, that's it for personal pronouns. So let's move on now to indefinite pronouns. So what are indefinite pronouns? Indefinite pronouns are pronouns that refer to one or more unspecified object, person, animal, or place. They are called indefinite simply because they do not indicate the exact object, person, animal, or place to which they refer. Now, many people teach that all indefinite pronouns are singular and therefore require singular verbs, but this is not correct. There are, in fact, three groups of indefinite pronouns. Now, these are my groups, the way I group them to help my students, and you may or may not find these groups in a textbook somewhere, but I will give you a book that you can use for more information in just a few minutes, so hang on. So the three groups, the way I group them, are the indefinite pronouns that are singular and require a singular verb, the indefinite pronouns that are plural and require plural verbs, and then those that can be either singular or plural depending on the sentence. So the indefinite pronouns that are plural and require a plural verb are several, both, few, and many. The indefinite pronouns that are single or singular and require a singular verb are any, anybody, anyone, each, either, neither, nothing, nobody, no one, someone, some, something, every, everyone, everything, all, each, and enough. And those that can be either singular or plural, depending on the sentence, are none, all, some, and any. So how do these pronouns work? Let's start with this scenario. We have two men. We'll call them Jim and Robert. They both work at the same company. Jim works at XYZ company, so we have a singular subject with a singular verb. Robert works at XYZ company, again, a singular subject with a singular verb. Jim and Robert work for XYZ company. Now we have a plural subject, Jim and Robert, with a plural verb, work. Now we want to replace Jim and Robert with the pronoun both. So both work for XYZ company. Plural subject, plural verb. Why? Because in the original sentence there were two subjects. It was a plural subject, so it had a plural verb. When we replace the subject with a pronoun, the verb has to stay the same. Now, we could replace both with several, many, and few, and have the same situation. Both people work at XYZ company, several people work at XYZ company, many people work at XYZ company, few people work at XYZ company. Now, let's look at an indefinite pronoun that can be either plural or singular, depending on the sentence. Let's look at this example. The sugar is on the floor. Sugar is a non-count noun, so it requires a singular verb. Now, let's add some to the sentence. Some sugar is on the floor. Where's the sugar? Some is on the floor. So some in this instance is singular using a singular verb. Now let's replace sugar with coins. The coins are on the table. The coins are on the floor. So we have a plural subject with a plural verb. Coins are. Now let's add some to the sentence. Some coins are on the table. Some coins are on the floor. So again, we have a plural subject, plural verb. Now let's replace coins. Where are the coins? Some are on the table. Some are on the floor. Plural subject, plural verb. Where's the sugar? Some is on the floor. Where are the coins? Some are on the floor. So the rule that you should take away from this is that you use the verb that you would use with the original noun, the antecedent. If the noun that you're replacing is plural, you use a plural verb. If the noun you're replacing is singular, you use a singular verb. And keep in mind that that's only for a select few of the indefinite pronouns. For more information about indefinite pronouns and how to use them, I recommend this book. It's called An Introduction to English Grammar by Sidney Greenbaum and Gerald Nelson. You can buy this on Amazon or in most bookstores. Now for your viewing pleasure, here's a chart that shows you all of the indefinite pronouns in the English language. Now let's turn our attention to demonstrative pronouns. A demonstrative pronoun is a pronoun that is used to point to something specific within a sentence. These pronouns can indicate items in space or time, and they can be either singular or plural. Because there are only 4 demonstrative pronouns in English, there are very few rules governing their usage. So if you can remember these rules, using demonstrative pronouns will be surprisingly easy. Rule number 1, demonstrative pronouns always identify nouns whether those nouns are named specifically or not. For example, I can't believe this. We have no idea what this is, but it's definitely something that I can't believe. It exists even though we don't know what it is. Rule number 2, demonstrative pronouns are usually used to describe animals, places, or things. However, they can be used to describe people if the person is identified in the sentence. Example, that sounds like Mary. So that identifies Mary. Rule number 3, demonstrative pronouns can be used in place of a noun so long as the noun being replaced can be understood from the pronoun's context. Now this concept might seem a bit confusing, but I'm going to give you some examples that will help clarify things. Okay, the first example, this was my mother's ring. This replaces ring because we could say this ring was my mother's ring, but we don't need ring twice in the sentence, so This was my mother's ring. We can understand from the context that this equals ring. Number 2, that looks like the car I used to drive. We can tell by the context that that is a car. That car looks like the car I used to drive. But we don't need to use car twice, so we get rid of it. That looks like the car I used to drive. Number 3, these are nice shoes, but they look uncomfortable. These, it's understood, are shoes. These shoes are nice shoes, but they look uncomfortable. We don't need shoes twice, so we throw one pair away. These are nice shoes, but they look uncomfortable. Those look riper than the apples on my tree. This one's a little more difficult to grasp right away, but those are talking about apples. Those apples look riper than the apples on my tree. So those apples, get rid of one of the apples, and we have those look riper than the apples on my tree. And lastly, these are correct answers. These, we understand from the context, are the answers. These answers are correct answers. Again, we don't need both answers, so we throw one away and shorten the sentence to these are correct answers. I hope those examples help clarify that particular point for you. And as before, here's a list of the demonstrative pronouns: this, that, these, and those. Now let's move on to possessive pronouns. Possessive pronouns are used to show possession. They can also be used as substitutes for noun phrases and are typically found at the end of a sentence. The only rule you really need to concern yourself with as far as possessive pronouns are concerned is that they do not contain apostrophes. Let's look at a few example sentences to see how possessive pronouns work. Sentence number 1. This is my cat, not your cat. So we can simplify that sentence by saying this cat is mine, not yours. Example number 2. I didn't have my book, so Jenny loaned me her book. It's repetitive, so let's make it better. Let's simplify it. I didn't have my book, so Jenny loaned me hers. And lastly, your car is a lot faster than my car. Again, repetitive. We need to simplify it. We can say, your car is a lot faster than mine. The last thing you need to know about possessive pronouns is that they often are accompanied by subject pronouns in a sentence. So here's a chart showing possessive pronouns along with their corresponding subject pronouns. Now it's time to talk about relative pronouns. What is a relative pronoun? A relative pronoun is used to refer to people, places, things, animals, or ideas. Relative pronouns can be used to join two sentences. There are only a few relative pronouns in English. The most common are which, that, whose, whoever, whomever, who, and whom. Relative pronouns typically introduce extra information in a sentence. For example, the book, when it was finally returned, was torn and stained. When it was finally returned is extra information and is therefore set off using commas. When relative pronouns introduce restrictive relative clauses, no comma is used to separate the restrictive clause from the main clause. For example, the cyclist who won the race trained hard. In American English, the relative pronouns whom and whomever are rarely used in everyday conversations. However, it is best to use them when writing to ensure that your work is grammatically correct. Who and whoever are used as subject pronouns. Whom and whomever are used as object pronouns. Here's a list of the most commonly used relative pronouns. That brings us to interrogative pronouns. Interrogative pronouns are used when asking questions. There are just 5 interrogative pronouns, and they are used to ask very specific types of questions. The 5 interrogative pronouns are what, which, who, whom, and whose. What is used to ask questions about people or objects. For example, what do you want for dinner? What are we doing tomorrow? What is your friend's name? What time will you be there? Which is also used to ask questions about people or objects. Some examples: which color do you prefer? Which of these ladies is your mother? She asked which train to take. Which seat would you like? Who is used to ask questions about people. Examples: who is that? Who is driving that car? Who are you? Whom is an interrogative pronoun that is rarely seen these days. It is also used to ask questions about people. Examples would be: to whom did you speak? For whom do you prefer to vote? You should ask whom to call. With whom do you live? And finally, whose is used to ask questions about people or objects and is always related to possession. Examples: whose sweater is this? Whose parents are those? Whose phone is that? I wonder whose dog knocked over our garbage can. In some cases, interrogative pronouns take on the suffix ever. A few can also take on the old-fashioned suffix soever. For example, whatever, whatsoever, whichever, whoever, whosoever, whomever, whomsoever, and whosever. Many students have trouble figuring out whether to use what or which because they're both used to ask questions about people, places, and objects. So how do you know which one to use? It's really very easy. What is used when the options you're talking about are unlimited. Which is used when your options are limited. For example, it's your birthday and someone asks you, what do you want for your birthday? There are many options for you to choose from. In fact, the options are unlimited. You narrow your options to a shirt. So you answer, I want a new shirt. So you go shopping for a new shirt. You find a few shirts in various colors. Now the question is, which color shirt do you want? So use want when the options are unlimited. Use which for limited options. That brings us now to reciprocal pronouns. Reciprocal pronouns are used to indicate that two or more people are carrying out or have carried out an action at the same time. There are only two reciprocal pronouns in the English language. They are each other and one another. Reciprocal pronouns are easy to use. There is really no hard rule about which one to use, so they are generally interchangeable. For example, Mary and John gave one another gold rings on their wedding day. Mary and John gave each other gold rings on their wedding day. They both mean the same thing and they can be used interchangeably. So as you can see, these pronouns are really very easy to use. The next type of pronoun we'll discuss are reflexive pronouns. In English grammar, a reflexive pronoun indicates that the person who is doing the action of the verb is also the recipient of that action. While this might seem strange at first, try thinking of a mirror. What do you see when you look into a mirror? You see yourself. You are doing the action of seeing, and what you see is you. Let's look at a few examples of reflexive pronouns that should help you understand. In fact, you will probably notice that you yourself use reflexive pronouns frequently when speaking or writing. Here are 8 sentences using the 8 reflexive pronouns in the English language. I was in a hurry, so I washed the car myself. You're going to have to drive yourself to school today. He wanted to impress her, so he baked a cake himself. Jennifer does chores herself because she doesn't trust others to do them right. The car is in a class all by itself. We don't have to go out. We can fix dinner ourselves. You are too young to go out by yourselves. The actors save the local theater money by making costumes themselves. And now here's a list of the 8 reflexive pronouns. That brings us now to the last topic of this video, intensive pronouns. Intensive pronouns are almost identical to reflexive pronouns. They are defined as pronouns that end in self or selves and place emphasis on its antecedent by referring back to another noun or pronoun used earlier in the sentence. It's relatively easy to tell the difference between a reflexive pronoun and an intensive pronoun. Intensive pronouns aren't essential to a sentence's basic meaning, but reflexive pronouns are essential. In addition, reflexive pronouns are always objects that refer to a sentence's subject. The following example shows a reflexive pronoun in action. Jim made himself coffee. In this sentence, himself is a reflexive pronoun that refers back to Jim. Without the reflexive pronoun himself, it would be impossible for us to know for whom Jim made coffee. Did he make coffee for himself or someone else? In the next example, himself is used as an intensive pronoun. The reader would be able to understand the sentence's complete meaning without this pronoun, but it serves to add emphasis. Jim made coffee for the king himself. Here, himself refers to the king rather than to Jim. The reader is meant to be impressed that Jim made coffee for the king. Intensive pronouns might not be necessary, but they serve the important function of making your sentences more interesting as well as more meaningful, particularly in formal situations. But use them sparingly to ensure that the emphasis they provide isn't lost. Okay, there you have it. English pronouns. I know this has been a rather long video and I want to thank you for sticking with me to the end. We're not finished yet. I want to review some of the key points that I covered in today's video. In today's video, you learned that a pronoun is a word that may be substituted for a noun or a noun phrase. The noun being replaced is known as the pronoun's antecedent. Personal pronouns function as both subject and object pronouns. Indefinite pronouns are pronouns that refer to one or more unspecified objects, beings, or places. They are called indefinite simply because they do not indicate the exact object, person, animal, or place to which they refer. There are three types of indefinite pronouns. Some are always singular, some are always plural, and a few can be either singular or plural. When used to represent a thing or things, demonstrative pronouns can be either near or far in distance or time. They always identify nouns, whether those nouns are named specifically or not. They can be used to describe people when the person is identified in the sentence. Demonstrative pronouns can be used in place of a noun, so long as the noun being replaced can be understood from the pronoun's context. Remember that possessive pronouns, even though they are used to show possession, do not use apostrophes. Relative pronouns can be used to join two sentences. Relative pronouns typically introduce extra information in a sentence. The relative pronouns whom and whomever are rarely used in everyday conversations. However, it's best to use them when writing to ensure that your writing is grammatically correct. You also learned that interrogative pronouns are used when asking questions. We use what when the options are unlimited. We use which when the options are limited. Reciprocal pronouns are used to indicate that two or more people are carrying out the same action at the same time. Anytime something is done or given in return, reciprocal pronouns are used. There are only two reciprocal pronouns, each other and one another, and they are generally interchangeable. We also talked about reflexive pronouns. Remember that a reflexive pronoun indicates that the person who is doing the action of the verb is also the recipient of that action. Then we talked about intensive pronouns. Intensive pronouns are almost identical to reflexive pronouns. Remember that an intensive pronoun is not essential to the sentence's basic meaning. However, a reflexive pronoun is essential to the meaning of the sentence. Also, intensive pronouns do not refer back to the subject of the sentence. I know this was a long video, but there was a lot to cover, so thank you for sticking with me to the end. If you are looking for more ways to improve your English, head on over to my website, John's ESL Community, where you'll find tutorials, games, and activities designed to help you improve your English. The link is in the description. If you like this video, hit the like button and share it with your friends, family, and classmates. If you are not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe for more videos that will help you improve your English. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.